A young woman was forced to undress, told she had no option, and lost her job contract the next day. The incident at a private MGM gathering never reached the news, but ended with an actress in the hospital, drugged and abandoned. In 1937, a female performer was attacked by a movie executive, and the truth was hidden through character assassination. She vanished. He got a promotion. These facts aren't in film history books because Hollywood wanted them hidden beneath award ceremonies, camera flashes, and trophies. The female stars from that era weren't just visual objects. They were controlled, sold, and thrown away as if they never mattered. Some were newcomers. Others were already famous, but they all ended up damaged, quieted, and substituted with newer talent. The worst part? The system that ruined them also wrote their final tributes. Here are 5 true stories. 5 accounts are so disturbing, harsh, and overlooked that they show what old Hollywood truly was, a place that created both beauty and victims. Patricia Douglas. She went to what she thought was a work event. She left hurt, shamed, and crushed by the most powerful system in the business. In 1937, Patricia Douglas was a young dancer hoping for a movie career. She answered an MGM casting call for what they claimed was a promotional film shoot. She didn't realize that she and other women had been chosen to attend a company sales meeting, a secret party with alcohol, drunk businessmen, and young women brought in for their enjoyment. Patricia was made to drink, and when she tried to leave, a company salesman chased her to the parking area and violently attacked her. She was only 20, and her life was forever changed. What followed was even worse. When she reported the attack, MGM used lawyers and press agents to destroy her reputation. They said she was loose, that she wanted it, that she was lying. She faced blame, mockery, and complete rejection. Media outlets controlled by the studios published stories making fun of her. The system that protected stars with unbelievable secrets silenced her with cruelty worse than initial violence. There was no trial, no consequences, no apology. MGM buried the scandal, and she never worked in the industry again. Patricia became forgotten, forever labeled as a crazy woman who dared to speak up. Meanwhile, her attacker kept working as if nothing happened. The case disappeared from records like it never existed. For decades, Hollywood made sure nobody remembered her name. It wasn't until 2003, with a documentary called Girl 27, that the world heard the truth. Patricia Douglas wasn't a single victim. She was a warning about what would happen to any woman who challenged studio power. A disgrace Hollywood never paid for, but one that left a lasting mark on its darkest history. Loretta Young, for years, people saw her as the perfect lady of classic movies. But behind that clean image was a terrible secret. Her daughter was the result of an assault. In 1935, Loretta Young filmed The Call of the Wild with Clark Gable, already considered untouchable on set. Charming, attractive, and also dangerously powerful. One night during location shooting, Gable forced himself on Loretta. He attacked her and got her pregnant. She was just 22. He was a huge star with wives, girlfriends, and studios supporting him. The result? A pregnancy that threatened her career, reputation, and future. The scandal needed to be controlled. MGM, which had Gable as its biggest moneymaker, couldn't allow negative publicity. So Loretta was sent to Europe under the excuse of health treatment. In reality, she was hiding her pregnancy. She gave birth secretly and placed the baby in a Catholic orphanage. Months later, she legally adopted her own child to make it look like charity. The daughter, Judy Lewis, grew up thinking she was adopted. She never knew Loretta was her birth mother. or that Clark Gable was her father. Loretta kept this hidden for decades. She didn't even tell her daughter. Although she carried this burden her whole life, only when she was old did she acknowledge what really happened. She said that back then she didn't even know that such an act could be called assault. It was a time when women couldn't say no, and movie idols did whatever they wanted without consequences. Clark Gable died without facing his crime. He remained loved, celebrated, and respected. She, however, was praised for staying quiet. The complete story came out after her death through memoirs and family interviews. What it revealed wasn't just a hidden crime, but Hollywood's perfect system for protecting its monsters. Cover up, erase, rewrite history. Loretta Young lived as a silent sufferer with a star's smile. A woman broken inside who never allowed herself to break publicly, because if she did, the system would have destroyed her completely. Diana Barrymore. She inherited the most famous name in American theater, but ended up alone in a hotel room, drunk, forgotten, and dead, at 38. Diana Barrymore had everything needed for success: beauty, a famous name, connections. She was legendary, John Barrymore's daughter, but she also inherited his troubles: alcoholism, instability, abandonment. From early on, she was pushed into show business like a family trophy. Universal signed her with great publicity, marketed her as the next drama star, and as soon as she stumbled, they dropped her. The studio promoted her as the great Barrymore's daughter, but privately treated her like damaged goods. Her personal life was terrible, shaped by the same system that once promoted her. She married 3 times to men who hit her, controlled her, or used her. One even took all her money for gambling. Every time she tried returning to films, producers looked at her with disgust. "The same drunk," they said. Nobody stopped to ask why someone like her was so damaged. Nobody questioned what Hollywood did to her once she stopped making money. Diana ended up in mental hospitals, given shock therapy, and public shame. Her life story, Too Much, Too Soon, wasn't successful because nobody wanted to hear a woman explain how fame destroyed her before she could even enjoy it. She died alone, surrounded by empty bottles and debt in a cheap hotel. The news only mentioned she was John Barrymore's daughter. The system that launched her rejected her. The name that made her famous crushed her. And her story, like many others, was buried under fake glamour. Susan Hayward. She won an Oscar playing a woman sentenced to death without knowing her own fate had already been decided by Hollywood's toxic script. Susan Hayward was fierce, bold, unforgettable. An actress with strength who didn't easily give in. But in old Hollywood, that was dangerous. The studios appreciated her while she made money. But behind scenes, they saw her as difficult. She suffered terrible headaches, emotional breakdowns, and anxiety attacks, which were really symptoms of years of emotional abuse, impossible work schedules, and hidden harassment by directors and producers. During filming of The Conqueror, one of her worst career choices, she was sent with the cast to shoot in the Utah desert, exactly where the U.S. government had done nuclear tests. The location was radioactive, but nobody told them. Of the 220 crew members, over 90 developed cancer, including Susan Hayward, John Wayne, and the director himself. It was like making a movie with death hidden in every grain of sand, and nobody protected them because, in Hollywood, the show always came before health. Susan died at 57 from brain cancer, but before that lived through abuse, bad relationships, medicine addiction, and a slow, painful decline. Her husband beat her and controlled her finances. Her agents gave her drugs so she wouldn't argue on set. Her talent made her famous, but her suffering remained invisible. When she no longer fit the image of the perfect star, The studio closed its doors on her. That cold, that cruel. Maureen O'Hara. They called her Hollywood's red-headed queen. But nobody mentioned she lived trapped under the unhealthy obsession of a famous director. Maureen O'Hara shined differently. It wasn't just beauty, but presence. A strong actress with a character who refused to be controlled. That made her a target for men who couldn't handle powerful women. One was John Ford, one of the most praised directors in classic cinema. He admired her, but also desired and controlled her. He chased her, manipulated her, and decided which roles she should take. His fixation damaged not just her career, but her personal life too. Ford directed her in several films. After each production, his behavior became more invasive. He phoned at all hours, bothered her on set, and embarrassed her in front of everyone just to break her spirit. Maureen had to smile on camera while hiding rage and helplessness inside. She couldn't confront him openly. She knew Ford had studio support, and any rebellion would leave her unemployed. So she endured it for years until finally, exhausted, she cut ties with him. But the damage was done. Beyond Ford, other executives approached her with inappropriate offers, pressure to pose nude, and hidden punishments whenever she refused. Once, a magazine invented a story about her kissing a man in a theater hallway to damage her modest image. When she demanded they apologize, the media called her dramatic. No one wanted to see Maureen as a victim because it spoiled the myth of the unbreakable star. But she was. Cinema wasn't ready to admit that even strong women could be hurt inside. Maureen lived to old age away from scandal, but never fully discussed what she endured. She didn't want to write revenge stories or ruin reputations, but in short interviews, she hinted at the difficulties she faced. She was one of few who escaped the system alive, but not unharmed. The cost of being a talented, brave woman in old Hollywood was a burden she carried her entire life. Jean Harlow. They marketed her as the original blonde bombshell, but behind that image was a young woman whose body and life were controlled by powerful men. Jean Harlow rose to fame in the early 1930s with her platinum blonde hair and sensual image. What the public didn't see was how studio executives and her own stepfather, Marino Bello, treated her like property. At just 21, Jean was already trapped in a system that saw her as nothing but a product. MGM controlled every aspect of her life, her weight, her appearance, even who she could date. They created a public image of her as sexually available while privately working her to exhaustion. Her stepfather, who became her manager, made deals with studio heads that often prioritized money over her well-being. He pocketed large portions of her earnings while pushing her to accept grueling film schedules that damaged her health. Jean was forced into a painful beauty regimen to maintain her famous platinum blonde hair. The weekly process involved harsh chemicals like ammonia, bleach, and Clorox that burned her scalp and eventually caused serious damage. When she complained about the pain, studio executives told her to endure it because her hair was her trademark. Her personal relationships were equally controlled. When she fell in love with actor William Powell, the studio interfered, concerned about how it might affect her bombshell image. Earlier, she had been trapped in an abusive marriage to producer Paul Byrne, who died by suicide just 2 months after their wedding. Rather than allowing her to grieve, MGM created a cover story and pushed her back to work immediately. June's health deteriorated under the pressure. By age 26, she was suffering from kidney failure, likely worsened by years of crash dieting, harmful hair treatments, and exhaustion. MGM kept pushing her to work, despite her illness. During filming of Saratoga in 1937, she collapsed on set multiple times. The studio gave her stimulants to keep going instead of proper medical care. When she died at just 26 from kidney failure, the studio immediately worked to protect its investment in her final film. They used a body double to complete Saratoga and turned her funeral into a publicity event. Jean Harlow, who had made millions for MGM, died with little control over her own money, body, or legacy. Her tragic story shows how studios literally worked their female stars to death while selling them as objects of desire. Dorothy Dandridge. She broke barriers as the first black woman nominated for a Best Actress Oscar, but the Hollywood system made sure she paid a devastating price for her success. Dorothy Dandridge possessed exceptional talent, beauty, and determination in an era when black actresses were limited to servant roles. After years of small parts and segregated nightclub performances, Dorothy finally gained recognition with her role in Carmen Jones, 1954. But even as she reached new heights, Hollywood's racism and exploitation created impossible obstacles. Studio executives saw her as a novelty, willing to promote her as an exotic sex symbol, but unwilling to cast her in most leading roles. After her Oscar nomination, Dorothy discovered that success didn't translate to equal treatment. She was still forced to use separate entrances at some of the very hotels where she performed. When she swam in a hotel pool during a tour, management drained and cleaned it afterward. Film offers that came her way after Carmen Jones mostly required her to play stereotypical roles or exotic temptresses. When she refused these parts on principle, she was labeled difficult. Meanwhile, her white counterparts like Marilyn Monroe and Elizabeth Taylor were offered diverse, complex characters. Her financial situation became dire when her manager and husband, Jack Dennison, mismanaged and stole her money before leaving her with massive tax debts. The same Hollywood system that briefly celebrated her did nothing to protect her from exploitation. Major studios watched as her career faltered, offering no support. Dorothy struggled with depression and alcohol dependency as opportunities disappeared. When she did secure roles, she was paid significantly less than white actresses in similar positions. For Porgy and Bess, she received a fraction of what her co-stars earned despite being the film's central female character. By the early 1960s, Hollywood had essentially abandoned her. Bankruptcy, repossession of her home, and increasingly rare job offers pushed her further into depression. She was forced to take nightclub gigs that paid poorly just to survive. Dorothy died in 1965 at only 42, found with a prescription pill bottle in her hand. The official cause was listed as an embolism, but many believe it was suicide. The same industry that had briefly held her up as proof of progress had systematically broken her down when she sought fair treatment and dignity. Her tragic story revealed the double standards faced by black actresses in Hollywood. They could achieve limited success only if they accepted exploitation, stereotyping, and second-class status. Dorothy Dandridge's brave refusal to compromise ultimately cost her everything in a system designed to punish those who challenged its unwritten rules. Behind every contract was a secret. Behind every bit of glamour, a wound. These women weren't simply forgotten. They were intentionally destroyed, abused, and silenced by the very system that claimed to cherish its stars. Most disturbing is that for decades, nobody dared tell the truth, because in old Hollywood, speaking up meant disappearing, being labeled difficult, crazy, problematic. Today, their names return to light, not as tributes, but to expose the suffering they endured simply by trying to exist with their own voices. Which story shocked you most? Which one do you think the industry tried hardest to hide? Share your thoughts. If this reveals classic cinema's darkest side to you, share it so these voices won't be buried again.